Hello and welcome to a special podcast series from the Healing Foundation, Healing Our Way. This is the second season of the Healing Our Way podcast, and in this series, young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people share their thoughts about intergenerational trauma, healing, and the concept of truth-telling. We yarn with the Healing Foundation's Youth Reference Group members and their special guests to talk about their journeys and their thoughts on how we can continue to heal our communities. To begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters across this beautiful continent. And we acknowledge and pay our respects to elders and to stolen generation survivors of the dreaming and of the here and now. We recognise the ongoing nature of trauma experiences for First Nations peoples, and we commit each day to survivor-led intergenerational healing. Before listening, please take note that this podcast may touch on sensitive topics related to trauma. So please take care while listening, and if you feel the need to speak out with anyone, you can contact 13YARN on 139276 and talk with an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander crisis support worker, your local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health centre, or your preferred support services. I'm Rachel Hocking, and I'm going to be your host for the second season of the Healing Our Way podcast. In this episode, we yarn with Blake Tatafu and Karlie Stewart about the issues that are affecting our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth, but also the issues that matter the most to them. Thank you both for joining me.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Look, I think it's always lovely to hear you introduce yourselves in your own words. So I'm going to start with you, Karlie. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Karlie. I'm a Yuin woman from the south coast of New South Wales. Most of my family lives in and around Nowra, throughout Nowra and Wreck Bay, which is in Jervis Bay. And I have mob pretty much from Lapa here in Sydney all the way back down towards the Victorian border. So pretty well connected down there on the south coast. I'm currently living in Wollongong, which is on Dharawal land. And I moved there about a year and a half ago, but before that I was living up here in Sydney on Bidjigal land. So have some pretty strong connections in around La Perouse, that kind of southeast Sydney community. So that's me. I'm 27 and the second eldest of 9 kids. So got a big family. And I feel really happy to be here and to be talking about this topic because, like I said, being the second eldest of so many young kids, I feel really passionate about this topic and making sure that we're representing young people in the best way that we can. So thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. Being from Wollongong and having all those South Coast connections, pretty special time seeing all the whales migrating.
Yeah. I've got this weird thing with whales where, like, I'll be driving past the ocean, won't be looking at it, and then I'll look over and there'll be, like, a whale breaching out of the water. It's so weird. It's been good. There's been heaps of like orcas even hanging around down around Merimbula, so that's pretty special.
Yeah, wow, they say the numbers are really thriving compared to a couple of decades ago. Hey?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see.
What about you, Blake? I've heard a bit about you in the previous episode, but for our listeners who are maybe meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, my name is Blake Tatafu. I'm a proud Wiradjuri Dunghutti man with my family coming from Trangie and Kempsey, and that's on my mum's side. And my father is a Tongan man, so I've grown up with a combination of two very strong and staunch cultures that both have a similarity with the connection to community and their family. Born and raised in Western Sydney on Darug country, where I still currently live. And I have a really good time with my community out there. I'm the eldest of 7, so I think I'm the parents' guinea pig, but also the oldest babysitter that they have. But that's fine by me because my sisters that are younger than me still think they're the boss of me, but that's all right. I work out in Western Sydney. A lot of my life is based out there, and I'm really passionate about the young people that I get to work with all the ways I get to see them grow and the way that they help me grow too.
Real similar. I'm second eldest of 7, but I'm the oldest girl, and you're right probably about your sisters there because I definitely boss around my older brother, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
Karlie, I wanted to ask you how you first got involved with the Healing Foundation. We heard a bit about Blake's journey to the youth reference group in the last episode, but how did you end up here?
Well, I was on my social work placement back in 2017 at a community service organisation around southeast Sydney, out there towards Lapa. And I had this email come across to apply for this forum, a youth forum with the Healing Foundation. And I thought I'd apply for it and see how I go. I didn't think I would even get a look in, to be honest with you. I don't know what. I just thought, this will be fun. So we went along, and it ended up being in Queensland, like kind of a little bit west of Brisbane, and heaps of other young blackfellas there. So it was good. I think we were there for 3 days, and we ended up putting together this report, and kind of from that, there was this idea that, we needed a youth reference group. And so the people who were there kind of formed the first interim youth reference group. So I was a part of that, and that went on for a little bit, and then I think it kind of just fizzled out over time, and I ended up becoming employed with the Healing Foundation, doing some stuff with the team down in Melbourne. So worked on the school's resources kit, and I was there for a little bit, and then ended up getting another job, finishing my uni degree. So went our separate ways, and then this email come across my desk a little while ago to apply for the youth reference group that we're on now. So I thought I'd love to be involved again. I just love the work that the Healing Foundation does and what we stand for, and trying to move away from the deficit kind of narratives and moving into, well, what do we need to do to make healing happen for our communities, and especially being a young person, talking about that stuff I think is important. So I feel passionately about it. I want to be a part of it. So I'm back on the youth reference group now with the Healing Foundation, and I co-chair that with Harry. So it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
Beautiful. Clearly it says a lot about the Healing Foundation that you were with the organisation, and then you took a break, you went somewhere else, but you came back. So, it's nice to see our community is really like nurturing the organisations that nurture us. And
I think one of the things that I respect is the staff. Like they're just so committed to what we do, and going above and beyond to support our communities and nurture our communities, and making sure that we especially the way that we kind of give visibility and a voice to our stolen generations mob, and making sure that they're looked after. And I've just always appreciated that about the Healing Foundation. It's not tokenistic or something that they do because they want the clout, so to speak. It's just genuine, and I appreciate being a part of it, and that's something that I really respect about the organisation. So yeah, especially when it comes to working with young mob here, because there is a lot of that tokenism out in those services. And we'll talk a bit more about the services that our young mob do have available to them a little bit later in the yarn. But Blake, I just want to pick your brain. What are you and your peers yarning about at the moment? What matters to you, mob?
I think what's really important for young people around my age at the moment is just the cost of living, and renting and housing availability. I think all of us are being challenged right now, just looking at different things, ways that we can save money, the ways that we can make more money. It's really material. But that's kind of something that's really prominent, because a lot of the people in my circle, in particular, my peers, we support our families financially, and it gets harder to do that, and it gets harder to support yourself, like when you're working hard and you're supporting your family, but everything just seems to be going up. That at face value is what we're talking a lot about from that aspect. But if we're looking a little bit further and a little bit deeper, I think there's a lot of conversations at the moment about the referendum. And there's a lot of conversations about justice reinvestment for our kids in my community. So you can kind of take your pick there.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mixed plate, but that's what's important to us right now.
And there's definitely threads that connect those experiences, but you're right, like bringing up cost of living first and foremost, we live in a capitalist society, and that is the reality of this world that we're in. And so because of the cost of living crisis, so many of not just our young mob, but anybody who's living on low income is having to prioritise just how you get food on your plate, how you get a shelter over your head, instead of maybe being able to pour their energy back into, the community stuff. back into those other issues you're talking about, whether it's yarning about the voice or talking about decarceration and justice reinvestment. I've noticed, I don't know how you think about this, but that when you have these money pressures, it zaps your energy and your ability to really engage in those other things that are meaningful to you. Do you find that, Karlie?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. But something else I'd say about having those money pressures is the sense of isolation and shame that you feel around not having money.
Okay.
I think like black fellas generally have always been kind of stereotyped as poor people, don't have money, don't want to work, don't want to this, don't want to that. And it, you know, there's already that kind of stigma that exists. I think there's deeper pressure than when, well, how am I going to send my kids to school if we don't have food in the house to send them to school with? And then there's the other pressures around, but then they're not going to school, or, you know, even kids just wanting to have a social life. Like I said, I've got 8 siblings and 4 of them are under the age of 18 in their kind of teenage years. So, well, 5 of them are, one of them's only 5, but the other 4, you know, they're 14, 16, 17 and 17. So it's, you know, they want to go to the movies with their friends, they want to go for drives with their friends, they want to do all this stuff. There's no money to do it. And so even when we're thinking about things like having pro-social activities and things to keep them entertained so they're not just getting caught up in trouble as kids do, as young people do, they're not able to, have access to those opportunities. So I think that's a big one as well, that isolation and how that impacts people's like spiritual and mental health and well-being. Like it's pretty tricky. I think there's the personal part of it where you're saying like you feel that burden personally because you're someone who provides for your family and all that, and I definitely feel that, but I think I'm lucky enough to have a job that I can do that, but you know, my mum doesn't have a job and my sisters don't have jobs and they're doing their HSC, and those things that relieve some of the pressures in life as it is, that makes them feel healthy and well and like they're thriving and able to contribute and you know, have that good spirit and that good self-esteem. I think it's a struggle all around. So I definitely agree that's
it kind of trickles down everywhere. I mean, you know, where I'm working now, we're getting lots of phone calls and emails from our parents that can't provide either devices for their kids to do at home learning for schools. Even though we're in a post-COVID living situation, it's still winter, it's still flu season, schools are still diverting to be working from home, and a lot of our young people in Western Sydney in particular are already excluded the moment they get sent home for work, for school, because they don't have access to those devices. And it's kind of like, okay, when you think about all of the outgoing money that you have in order to support a family, a lot of the families that I work with don't even have enough to stay at like a median level of surviving. So with everything going up, and I know money is such a almost crass thing to talk about, right? But it's something that's so real, and it's like hitting everybody. Like I think I was having a conversation with one of the mums that came in. She said, look, it's honestly a lot easier to go to Macca's every night than to cook a home-cooked meal for my kids, because that's just how it's going.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of studies done on how, like, McDonald's were places where poor communities came together and bonded, and often poor black communities, you know, and still to this day often the cheapest option for a lot of families. And so, there might be a lot of judgment attached to that, but guess what? That's what people can afford. And there's also, I don't know, back when I was growing up, it was a bit of a sense of community, especially when you went to the KFC up the road. And big
meeting
bucket.
spot.
Yeah, a meeting spot, that's it.
Yeah. We laugh because they got 3 Maccas in Nowra on the main road. There's one when you come into town, one in the middle of town, and one when you leave town. When they were building them, I said, what do they need all these Maccas for? Well, where are the kids going to go after school? They need a Macca's to hang out. I thought, surely they can go to a park or someone's house or Kmart even, just go somewhere. Why are you got to sit around at Macca's for? But anyways, it's just what it is. So funny.
It's often where we get our first jobs too, you know.
Yeah. I worked at Macca's. I'm not hating.
Yeah. Good training ground.
Yeah.
That's it. You touched on another thing, Blake, that I think is really important, and that's like this, like, working from home and doing school from home. And it's, you know, not even just like having access to an iPad or a laptop, but just simple things like, do you have a strong enough Wi-Fi connection? If you have those things, overcrowded housing, you know, like, and even if it's not overcrowded, but just having like multiple family members that you share a home with, having animals in the background, you know, our families always have dogs running around. And then, just having the quiet space to like actually focus when you have multiple responsibilities as a family member, as a community member. And it must get really frustrating to hear all these politicians talking about personal responsibility as if we have the ability to care about our individual needs more than our collective community needs. Is it getting frustrating hearing how politicians are yarning about young mob and the cost of living crisis at the moment?
I'm sick of young people being exploited by politicians for either, goodwill or support towards whatever they're trying to do for any election commitment, but even just using them as a fluff piece to push their agenda. I think young people get used as a tool just to be like a filibuster, right? They're just thrown in there to be like, okay, we're thinking about the young people. This is how we're going to address youth crime, for example. It's always sensationalized and it's just used in a way as a tactic to, I guess, for them to push another narrative. So young black kids in particular are constantly being trashed to be seen as a problem that needs a remedy, a problem that they have a solution for. And it's so frustrating because the solutions are never by politicians. The solutions are from the kids themselves.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you don't really see, they're not getting young mob really, they're not handing over the microphone. They're speaking for all young people as if they know and can tap into their minds. I got some, sad and very well-known statistics to read out. And the reason I do this is just because I think it's important to remind listeners who might not be across everything that we deal with as blackfellas. But as we know, Australia locks up kids as young as 10 years old. We know our black kids are overrepresented in those figures, and we know that in the Northern Territory there are multiple times where those figures are 100% of young people in juvenile detention are Aboriginal. How do you and your peers think about the way the Raise the Age campaign has gone in the last couple of years? I'll start with that. How do you feel about how the Raise the Age campaign has gone over the last few years? Because it feels like it's had these peaks where it's been talked about a lot, and then it feels like it goes real quiet for a while. Karlie, how do you reflect on the campaign?
Well, just generally speaking, I think the campaign is so important. And I've told personal stories at times about why we need to be doing what we can to prevent interaction of these kind of oppressive systems like policing and the judicial system with our young black kids especially, but I think just young kids generally, they don't need to be interacting with those systems. And so I think generally speaking it's something that I find really important, I'm very passionate about. To answer your question about how I feel about it at the moment, I agree that it goes through these peaks and valleys, and a couple of years back we felt like we'd had a lot of momentum, and it really felt like, we're going to be able to do something with this, and then all the states and territories just voted it down. And
that's right, at COAG we had this big hope. I remember that moment. And I think that's the part of that that's disappointing for me, is that so much of that is because of public kind of rhetoric around punishment and discipline, and, well, if a young person does something wrong then they need to be punished for it. But so it is very much a national conversation where we need to be flipping that kind of rhetoric on its head and saying, well, kids don't deserve to be punished for being kids, or for not having access to the opportunities that prevent them from doing crime, if that's what they want to call it. And as well, we need to be looking at the reasons why young people are committing crime and the kind of crime that they are doing. Like, in my opinion, if a young kid's going to the shop and stealing food because they haven't eaten and they're hungry, why are we punishing kids for that? Why are we not saying, okay, well, there's obviously something going on here that this kid feels like they need to go and steal food? Or, kids jumping buses or trains or whatever to get to where they need to be. Why are we having police interactions with kids over doing that stuff? They deserve to be able to access public transport just as much as we who can pay for it do. So I think there's the public conversation, I think, that contributes a lot to the reason why it doesn't have as much traction as it should. And to me, personally, it just feels really silly. I don't know why
we're even having a conversation about it. I don't even know why we're locking 10-year-old kids up, 11-year-old. I don't know why we're locking anyone up, to be honest with you, but children, you know, I was in casework a couple of years back, and the age group that I predominantly worked with was 12 to 17-year-olds. So much of that work was in and out of courts, in and out of youth Koori court, driving to and from Reeby out near Campbelltown, and picking kids up from where they were locked up, bringing them home, doing it again the next week, breach bail, gone to court, like just that cycle. And you just think, like, this is preventing these kids from doing other things that actually make them feel good and give their lives some kind of purpose and meaning. And I'm just wasting my time. I'm wasting their time. They're wasting their own time. Everyone's wasting their time trying to lock up kids. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And especially during COVID, you know, I had a client who was locked up for 23 hours for the whole 7 days that she was locked up for out at Reeby. And they had her, because it was during COVID, they had her isolated. So there was 7 days where she was locked up away from the rest of the unit, and she was only allowed outside for an hour a day. That's like solitary confinement. That's the type of stuff you do to torture
Literally.
legitimate criminals, you know, people who are doing some really serious stuff wrong in our society. And she just had a breach bail because she was on the wrong train. And it's like, you know, where do we draw the line? If we're having a conversation about, you know, these kids need to be punished, is that a punishable offence for someone to not see sunlight for 23 hours a day and separated from their peers? And yeah, I just think it's such a big conversation and such an important conversation. I think we could be doing better as a nation to kind of engage in that, you know, that discussion and trying to flip people's minds about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're absolutely right, that language of punishment, even the language of rehabilitation, you know, these ideas that, especially when you're talking about children, but as if they have problems that are theirs to solve, as if their life circumstances are their responsibility. I just think it's heartbreaking. You know, we have it in our family too, and it gets exhausting because you can see the cycle repeating itself before it even happens, and you know what's going to happen, and you know it's a waste of time, and you know it's a waste of state money, plus your family's money and your resources, but there is nothing stopping it. And the wait lists for the restorative services and the culturally appropriate rehabilitation centres, they are just so long for our young mob, you know. Blake, for you and the communities you're a part of, what do the services look like that actually do provide healing for our mob? Like, what are the services that you all lean on?
Some of the spaces that I've been involved with, including from where I've worked, all that they have in common is that they're inclusive. They let the young people lead their journey or lead their program or their group, whatever that may be. It's putting them at the centre of everything. So it's giving them agency, it's giving them self-determination, and it's giving them leadership, because our young people are already inherent leaders of their own journey. They're the experts. So when we're working with young people, we know as Aboriginal people that we can't come in even at our ages. I can't dictate or give pure proper advice to a 15 to 12-year-old about what works for them or how I can help them in a particular area of need. They're the ones who have to tell me because they're the experts. Organisations who've been very much youth-led and person-centred have always had great outcomes. I also want to say on the flip side that there's been a lot of NGOs who have used young Aboriginal people to start groups or to start something that gets them excited, it gets them, it gets them participating, and then it goes nowhere. And it kind of puts them at a place of distrust with any type of services that try to do the right thing.
It's like blackcladding.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll think of without even naming names, I'll just say an NGO gets a certain amount of money to work with young Aboriginal kids. They set up a campaign and set up a program and may have a shelf life of 12 months. You get these black kids together for 12 months. You give them hope that they've got importance. You give them a bit of meaning. You give them their self-determination, their agency. They're excited to come together and do things and be a part of something, have a part of belonging outside of where they already fit in. they do the project, they do the program, and then it runs out, or then it ends because the funding's ended. There's a massive distrust that comes from after that. And I mean, I used to really push a lot of my younger cousins into those spaces where they can, you know, do something for the community or do something in sports, do something in arts. And all of them had limited funding or limited availability from services. Or if not, an extremely long wait time to be a part of something. And they're not interested now. Like, you know, there's a certain window of time that you can get our young people engaged and involved. And if you let them down the first time, you've lost them.
God, that's such a good point, Blake, because, you know, yeah, what can happen during that waitlist time is, like, crucial, right? You know, you can lose so much of that engagement, that willingness, because once again, the system is sidelining their needs, and often they're, like, critical needs. Yeah, and then it's interesting in talking about, you know, these anonymous NGOs, because what can also happen is, you know, this competition for money that really should be directed towards Black services run by Black people.
Absolutely. What frustrates me is that if there are no services that can provide adequate opportunities to our young people, chances are they're going to go in another direction that may not be healthy for them or positive. Because when you think about it, you've already got society and law that looks at our kids from 10 years old thinking that they have the right mind to determine what's right or wrong. So they're already going to be tried as an adult in crime anyway, if they engage in it or if they engage in risky behaviours. And I'm not saying that these programs for them should be, programs for young people should be there to prevent youth crime, or, you know, what that looks like, crime, inverted commas, or like youth being disengaged from regular services. It's just that you're going to lose them to something else if you don't focus on what they're good at already. Like I've said it before and I always say it, young people are already excellent. Young people carry with them a strength and a power that they may not know yet. Some might know, but they've got that with them. And I guess for me as an older man now, I look at them and think, okay, cool. There's so much potential that I can show you that you have, and then you can do whatever you want with it because it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's Black. But you lose them and you've lost them for a long time. The work to get them back, the work to get them to self-believe, the work to get them to really see themselves for who they are, which is great and proud and Black, the work is so much harder. And sometimes you don't get them back.
That's true. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Blake, because it goes to show like how much of a mentor you have, you know, also become as well as a young person. You know, you really like when you can just see the innate joy you get from talking about our young mob and you feel it. That's when they're going to feel it. You know, when they see us feeling that proud. I wanted to talk to you, Karlie, about what differentiates like a proper Black therapeutic service from something that's tokenistic. You know, what makes it strong?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, I was talking to my sister, my older sister. She's got a son and he's in kindergarten. And I was talking to her the other night about just getting him someone to talk to. And as I was having this conversation, I was thinking, is he going to want to talk? Like, maybe he just should do like art therapy or play therapy. And then, anyways, I suggested all these solutions to my sister. And then at the end of the phone call, I just said, maybe we just need to get him out on country. Like, in my head, I was falling asleep and I was like, maybe we can just take him, I don't know, get some oysters or just things. I was thinking back at what we used to do that made us feel really strong and healthy as young fellas. And it was always being at the beach or, you know, we used to take a pot of water down the beach, start a little fire and cook periwinkles on the rocks. So we'd be at the beach all day and that would just be me and 15, 20 of my cousins, you know. And that's the stuff that makes us feel strong and connected and grows our identity as Black fellas. We learn who we are as Black people, not who other people tell us we should be as Black people. Yeah. And I think that's what's important for our young fellas, is having a space where they feel that they can express themselves in a way that they want to, not how we tell them that they should. Or, you know, even if if we say, oh, they need cultural opportunities, well, what does that actually look like for them? It's not about white fellas saying, oh, well, here's what culture looks like. That's colonising our cultures. again, you know, we need to move away from that kind of these Western kind of ways of doing things and start thinking about how we do things as Black people. And that looks different depending on where we are. You know, Blake and I, we're both here on the East Coast, and, you know, I can't speak for someone from Central Desert or South Australia or WA or anywhere else. You know, I can only speak for my experience and where I'm from, and I know what works for us, but I'm not going to know what works somewhere else. And that's, you know, when we talk about what's the difference is, we need to be talking about place-based, community-led kind of stuff. No use me as a Black person who's trained in social work and different kind of therapies and all this stuff saying, oh, this is what will work for fathers in Alice Springs, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I don't know what they're experiencing or, you know, what kind of problems they might need to address. On a theoretical level, I might, but in practicality and what it means to actually get people engaged and to keep them interested, and like you said, don't lose that window where you've got them. That needs to come from community, and it needs to be led by people in community. And I think that's one of the issues as well with where we direct our funding to. We fund a lot of these big kind of Christian Catholic corporations to do work with mob, instead of funding those kind of services that are on the ground. So you got these big kind of corporations doing the so-called work, and it's like, people who are on the ground in community building those relationships are fighting over crumbs, and these big corporations have got all this money, and like they're asking the little guys to do the work because they can't engage them, and it's like, well, stop funding them then. Give the funding to people who actually want to do the work on the ground and are letting community lead that and kind of have a say about what that looks like. So I think, like, in a roundabout way, that's the difference is between Western models and kind of ways. And I try and move away from that, even the framing of culturally appropriate. I want something to be culturally responsive. And that means that we're not homogenising blackfellas across the country and saying, you know, all blackfellas need this, or all blackfellas need that, or Black services need to look like this. We're actually going, we acknowledge that there's a variety of different cultures that exist across this continent, and we need to be building our services and nurturing our services in our communities in ways that work for our communities, not what the governments tell us we need to do. A state government, the New South Wales government, for example, oversees the biggest population of blackfellas in all of Australia. How's a state government going to tell me what to do here in Sydney and then go out to Brewarren and tell them what to do out there, or up to Moree or out to Dubbo? It's going to look completely different. So, I think to answer your question in a very long-winded way is making sure that what we're doing is place-based, genuinely, not just saying it because it's this tagline, doing it and meaning it, and and letting young blackfellas and older blackfellas in community say what needs to happen and what they want to see happen and how they get there, I think is the difference. And that's not to say that Western models don't work, because obviously talking therapies do work. We know that. You know, we have services like 1-3 Yarn. That's a talking therapy. We have play therapies, we have art therapies, we have equine therapies, and we know that these kind of Western models and Western approaches work. It's being able to decolonise them and use our ways of knowing and doing things within those therapies, so kind of integrating them in different ways. But that can only come from mob on the ground. It can't come from even mob at a national level, you know. Like, we can't say in a big kind of advisory group, oh, this is what need to happen. It doesn't matter what we say. It matters what young blackfellas on the ground are saying about what they need.
That's right, localised, community-led. And we saw a really good example of that, you know, when I'm from Central Desert, my family are Warlpiri, and when Alice Springs was getting a lot of news coverage at the beginning of this year, it was such a relief to finally see organisations like Children's Ground in Mbantua and Alice Springs actually given a platform to speak about those local issues, because you're right, it doesn't work when you're not from that place, when you don't have connections to that community. There are just too many different nuances. And so, I think once again, like, the answers exist. You know, there are solutions on the table, but it's how much they're being listened to.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, like, conversations I think that are starting to get big in community. You asked Blake before, you know, what are the things that you and your peers are talking about? Something that my peers are talking about is data sovereignty and making sure that we have access to the stuff that belongs to us, you know. And it's because we have the solutions, but we actually need to know what we're working with to be able to address it, you know, with the solutions that we already have in our community. So those conversations go hand in hand. And I think you know, in that conversation about funding for services and organisations, you have these big corporates and these big governments that government organisations that have access to that kind of data, and so they're able to fill out funding applications and stuff better than the, you know, Aboriginal organisations on the ground are able to, because they don't have access to that information. So it looks better. If you're someone far off in a department way away and you're just reading paperwork and figuring out who's going to get money for this grant, you've got all this big pot of money that you've got, who's going to get it? It's going to be the people who look like they know what they're talking about. Yeah. And so it's that whole big conversation at the moment. I think that's, I don't know if young people on the ground are talking about that, but as an older young person who's like having a look at things and going, well, what do we need to be doing differently and what can we kind of be advocating for? That's one of the things that we're thinking about and talking about.
Are there spaces at the moment where young mob can talk about data sovereignty?
I personally have been involved in a couple of different things where young people are talking about that, and I won't speak to Mount Druitt because that's your area and you obviously know it better than I do, but some of the young fellas that I've worked with from out that way have been talking and been involved in conversations about that. I think particularly in the justice reinvestment space, we're talking about data sovereignty. I know as well, like in regards to child protection and out-of-home care, I think that's another area that it's being spoken about. I think the kicker is always going to be, well, are these people in positions of power actually going to listen, and do they care what we've got to say? That's always going to be the end point, I think, because if they do, then great, just let us have access to the things that are about us. But if not, we're always going to be pushing bricks up a hill. So
yeah, we're coming close to the end, and I know we're chewing up all this time so fast. Like, this is what happened last time, Blake. We're young and we're like 1 hour's gone. But I do think it's important to go back to the point both of you brought up right at the beginning. You know, we're talking about not just services that exist to facilitate the healing of our mob, whether, you know, it's through the justice system or whatever, but actually having spaces and services that are there to exist purely for Black excellence and Black joy. Mm-hmm. Do those spaces currently exist in your communities?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I have the privilege of working at Kimberwali, which is the Aboriginal Centre for Excellence, where I, in my role there, get to see multi-generations of Aboriginal people coming together to exercise and learn in their culture and practice their culture. One of the things that I was very proud of establishing last year is a men's and boys' dig group, where we sourced all the diges ourselves. We got that all together, and we said that the registration was for a young person or a child, a male, obviously, and they could bring a male family member that's their uncle or their dad, or even, you know, if they don't have that in their family, then someone else that's close to their family unit. And I remember one night we had like a full house. We had 100 participants. So we had 50 kids plus their extra family member. And it was, that night in particular, we had 4 generations of a family all there, all learning to play the dig together, because those opportunities weren't available to the father or the grandfather or the uncle. So seeing that in a very small but big way, that's something that I get to do that changes their history and their journey as Aboriginal men, means a lot to me. Like, that's something I didn't have either as a child, and that's something that I wish I had. But in that particular place where I'm working now, we do a lot of things where it's the thirst for families, and we're doing it not to address a social problem or a social need. We're doing it for the strengthening of our community connections and our culture, because that in itself will be a part of our healing, it'll be a part of positive health outcomes for ourselves if we remain and stay connected to the things that make us who we are. And be fearless and be unapologetically Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Yeah, I think just having permission to just be happy, you know, having permission to just like take on a new skill or be around other mob, and with no expectation that it's got to lead to something.
Yeah.
You know? It's just like learning for the sake of learning, joy for the sake of joy.
And that's right. And all of the programs that we run have been told to us by our young people.
Hey.
They've told us what they've wanted, and so we've created it, we've piloted it, and if it works, we keep offering it until we can't offer it anymore. And then we ask our young people again, What do you need? What's going on? So the consultation that we do is endless. And I think it's important because I've mentioned it before. What was good for, a person that's 10 years old now is different from what was good for them 10 years ago. So I'm really fortunate and really lucky, and I just hope that this is something that can be remodeled in other communities, or that the other communities have the opportunity to do something like this. Because it's not just changing the lives of individuals and the communities and families. I feel like my life is changing because of it too. No. I get to witness cultural excellence every day. And it doesn't have to be the best athlete or the smartest academic. It's looking at a 5-year-old boy and his father learn a new cultural skill together that wasn't afforded to dad back when, or grandfather back then. That's what's excellent to me.
Isn't it deadly the way you describe that? Because often we have to, when we have these services, you have to provide measures of success.
Yeah.
And they often go against these Western markers. And it's like, what you just described, how do you measure that? What does that, there is no number, that you can put on that.
Well, if you do find out, let me know, because I need to let Treasury know.
Well, I think the storytelling is a way of measuring it, just yarning. Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like that's what I receive and that's what I see. And I can't put it into measurement either. I can't tell you how big or how small of gratitude, of joy that I experience when I see these things happen. I can't. But, we're fortunate to have that in Western Sydney.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Sometimes you don't need to, you can just step back and be like, this doesn't need to have some sort of other thing put on top of it to say it ticks these boxes, it achieved.
Validate it.
Exactly.
By Western measures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let it be.
Yeah.
Do you have places, communities, social events, just where do you find Black joy and excellence in your community, Karlie?
Well, I think I was pretty lucky to grow up with some really strong leaders in our community around La Perouse. And those were older people that were going on their cultural journeys and understanding what they didn't have access to and trying to build those kind of pathways so that their kids could have access to it. So we always grew up in a way where we were doing cultural dance stuff and, being invited to perform and all that kind of stuff. But that's gone a step further now with us as young fellas growing up. Moving into new spaces now and doing things proper cultural ways, going through ceremony and learning our laws and how they govern us and tell us our responsibilities about places. So I'm seeing that happen a lot now. And in my job I manage alongside another deadly black fella from this community, or he lives in this community. He's not from here, but we manage the Aboriginal healing program together, and his stream of it is the cultural engagement side of things, and these are young fellas who have been through their ceremony and their proper men's stuff, and they're coming back and they're giving back to community and teaching them, how to make artefacts and teaching them about plants and different kind of animals and doing things proper culturally, how we did it long ago. And so I think for me there's a lot of respect in community for people who are doing that kind of stuff and making sure that things are passed on the right way and how they were intended to be. So there's that. But then there's also the other spaces where we kind of find our joy, with Black artists and musicians and moving into spaces that we've always kind of had access to, but I felt like it used to be a bit radical even to go to a gig or to go and perform in this space or to be invited to this. It was kind of tokenistic or a bit like left field. Now I feel like we're occupying those spaces with people like Kobe D and Barker and Dobby, people who are really kind of giants, I suppose, at this point in time in that kind of Black music scene. So I think, we do things in a cultural way, but we also can feel our cup as Black fellas being together and just celebrating together and celebrating each other. Yeah. In other ways, in those kind of artistic spaces and appreciating the skills that we've been given from our old people. And, there's that saying that goes around that, I'm my ancestors' wildest dream. And that's, when I see people like Barker perform, and it makes you think about stuff like that. Like you've just got this gift of storytelling. And, and I think that's another space where it's kind of a privilege here on the East Coast that we're afforded those things because, we get access to those people so much easier than mob out in kind of more isolated areas do. So I feel very lucky and very privileged when I'm able to be in those spaces with other blackfellas and celebrating. But I think there's stuff happening all over the place. There's no shortage of things that give our communities pride and joy and love and respect and celebration.
Yeah.
And so, I think I personally have felt the tide kind of shifting in the last 5 or 6 years. And just before COVID, it felt like there was this wave of like, oh, it's all right to be black. I don't know whether that was my own personal journey as a black woman. But I don't know, it just feels like we're allowed to take up more spaces and we push into the spaces where we felt like we haven't been allowed to be before. So there's the cultural side of things and actually being black people and learning those traditional kind of cultural skills, like you said, Blake, or the knowledges. But there's also the other side of it where we just get to go and be together and celebrate in spaces that we haven't been allowed to occupy before. So
Be ourselves.
Just to be ourselves and show up as who we are.
Visible blackness.
Because it's excellent enough.
Yeah.
Okay. 100%.
Yeah.
When you were talking about, all these events and, it feels like there's no shortage. I was thinking that, like, just last month, and definitely access issue. I know this very well because, not every single community has events held super regularly. But, here being on Gadigal land, being in the biggest, most populous city in the continent, I get a bit spoilt sometimes. And I was thinking that particularly last month, when there was like a clash of 3 like proper black events on the same night. I was like, do you mob talk to each other? You're making us choose. But then I was like, no, this is good.
Yeah.
We are spoilt for choice.
Yeah.
Like, I love this now, but I was also,
Those nights when that happens,
Yeah.
I just stay home. I can't pick. I just stay home.
Which one?
I try to make them all. I try to commit.
You've got way more energy than me then. I just sit at home. Watch it all on Instagram.
Yeah. All the live stream. Because that's the other thing as well. Like what I really liked about COVID, who the hell has ever said that? One thing that, one of the benefits that we've learnt as, I think, a society after COVID is that we can make things more accessible, When mob can't reach events, we can stream them and we've gotten so good at it now. And it's not always the same, but I'll tell you what, like I've had a pretty good time in my lounge rooms and streaming some concerts. Yeah. We have chewed up so much time yarning. Thank you both so much. Like always, I've never stopped learning from young mob, even though I'm only 30 myself and still consider, somewhat. But I do think growing older, like I'm really appreciating being connected to the younger people in my life and being pulled up and reminded about the fact that we do have to keep bringing along the people who are in those younger categories into these conversations. We can't just keep talking about young mob without young mob. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to wrap up now with a couple of words. So, thank you for listening. For more information, head to the Healing Foundation website at healingfoundation.org.au. If you need a yarn after listening to this episode, remember we encourage you to connect with 13 Yarn on 139276. And you can talk with an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander support worker, or you can go to your Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Centre. And if you have a preferred support service, remember to reach out. This podcast is a co-production between the Healing Foundation and 33 Creative, recorded here on Gadigal land.